This is Tim Rogers with Dodgers 2080 for the Blue Madness podcast. We have a very special interview coming up in which we talk with the authors of an amazing book called The All-Time Dodgers Art Book. And real quick, the website for that is thealltime.com. What you get in this work of art, and it really is straight up a work of art. It's 157 pages, comes in hard copy and paperback, forwarded by Oral Hershiser. The paintings inside of it are done by Dave Hobrecht. And the text, the essays, player reviews, the selection of the team, all done by Ned Colletti. This book took over 3 years to complete. I'm not going to talk too much more about it because I want to make sure that you watch the interview where we cover a lot of different topics. And then after that, after the interview, I'll come back and we'll talk about how to get it a bit more and why you should get it. Well, they're going to sell it to you anyway. So please listen. It's enjoyable. It goes into some Dodgers history, just some great story. And Ned Colletti himself is a treasure in how, and he just retains so much memory about what happened in the history. He really cares about the history of baseball, but specifically the Dodgers. You can tell he still loves the team. That he helped get this thing started. I mean, just for a couple notes about Ned Colletti's contribution. He was hired November 2005. In his first offseason, he traded for Andre Ethier and signed his free agents Rafael Furcal, Nomar Garciaparra, Kenny Lofton, and Takashi Saito. And also, his first draft pick ever was Clayton Kershaw. Over the period of time, overall notable draft picks included D. Gordon, Nathan Eovaldi, Jock Peterson, Corey Seager, Ross Stripling, Cody Bellinger, Alex Verdugo, and Caleb Ferguson. A lot of those guys used in the championship team in 2020, but also used as trade to build the team. Big trades later, over his time, brought in, of course, Manny Ramirez and Adrian Gonzalez. Adrian Gonzalez trade is an underrated trade, as it really did set a new tone. Big signings over his period of time: Justin Turner, Hiroki Kuroda, Zach Greinke, Hyun-Jin Ryu, Yasiel Puig, Juan Uribe, and Julio Urias. He also converted Kenley Jansen from a catcher into reliever. And you can find a lot of information about what Ned's done in his own book called The Big Chair. Highly, highly recommend. It's a great audio listen. That's how I did it on Audible. It is absolutely amazing. So, without further ado, and with a screw up of me right at the beginning with the book title, it's called The All-Time Dodgers Art Book, not just The All-Time Dodgers. Without further ado, the interview between myself, Dave, the artist, Dave Hobrecht, and the writer, Ned Colletti. This is Tim Rogers with the Dodgers 2080 Blue Madness podcast. We have a very special two guests in the house. We have Ned Colletti, former general manager of the Dodgers, who set the foundation of this team that you see on the field today and has been very successful. And we have Dave Hobrecht, and he is the author or co-author and the artist in drawing the book that we're going to talk about. It's called The All-Time Dodgers. And it is an absolutely beautiful book. Dave, since people probably aren't as familiar with who you are, tell us about yourself a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my name's Dave Hobrecht. I'm a sports artist based out of Laguna Beach, California. I do charcoal and pastel paintings, realistic paintings. So yeah, that's basically what I did. I produced this book with Ned, and basically dream job. Got to work with Colletti and then got to paint Dodgers. So it's my favorite topic. I only do sports. I only do black and white. But if I could do baseball and the Dodgers all day, I would. So yeah, that's me.
All right, and Ned, tell us a little bit about your evolution to doing this book with Dave.
Well, I don't know anything about art, but I do know when I see something really cool. And I ran into Dave a few years, maybe 10 years ago now, maybe more than that. And he was I actually commissioned him to do a painting for me, kind of a personal look, and went into his shop in Laguna and walked in and was taken aback by the beauty of his work. And after we finished doing our the thing I had asked him to do, he came up with the idea of doing this book, and if I would put the team together and write, synopsises, maybe more than a synopsis, on a lot of the players that we talk about. Putting together the team was not easy because this is a historic franchise. We tried to set up criteria and did set up criteria. You had to play for a while for the Dodgers. You had to have obviously success on the field, some postseason success, if not a lot. Be good in the community, serve your country if that was in the era. And we also wanted to pay respect to the history of the franchise going back, in some cases, 80 years, 90 years. Those players, why they don't play anymore, they shouldn't be forgotten. So a lot of different dynamics went into it. I talked to a lot of scouts, talked to a lot of people who had been around the game for a long time and had a good feel for, knowing who was some of the all-time best.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I've always found frustrating is when people try to compare players from different eras. You can't compare a guy today who has all these nutritional things and all these extra workouts and all the medical help versus, when Babe Ruth played. It's a different time. And it
No
looks
doubt.
like as I looked in the team, I was able to see that you were, grading based on their, how they played against each other. It looked like, in their era, and I think it's a fair way to do it. Even though I still wonder, Sandy Koufax today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's one of those ones I always would wonder about. So in terms of the criteria and all that, so now you have a criteria. And you guys have started to go, okay, we're making this book. And I read that it took you guys 3 years to make this book. So Ned, did you do like, hey, here's my all-time Dodger team, and you were able to make it 26 instead of 25? And it's not just the players, it's the manager, it's the broadcaster. And there's more, and then there's even more to the book of historical moments that were there, including capturing the 2020 World Series. But as you guys made this book, how did you have that team right up front, or did that team evolve over the 3 years?
Well, I'll go first. It evolved a bit. We, I think I started with the starting pitching and the pitching staff. We started there. I told Dave who I had in mind, so he could start working on it, and we kind of built it section by section. And then Dave had the great idea because you limit it to 25 players, and then when MLB expanded the rosters to 26, Dave gave me one more player I could add. I needed about 10 more players to add, and he came up with the idea of having special moments in Dodgers history. These players are not necessarily in the all-time great Dodger when you're going to limit it to 26, but to have the Kirk Gibson home run, one of the most iconic moments in the history of the sport, to be able to capture that and put Kirk in a painting, and things like that. That was his idea. So once we got done with the players, we're about 90% there. We started to add some of the other historical moments, Hershiser's scoreless streak, different things like that, so we could capture a lot more than just it's tough to say bare bones 26 players, but there's so much more to the organization than just that piece of it.
Yeah, and Dave, one of the things that I read about you was in your process of drawing these players, you don't get to erase your mistakes.
Yeah. So the process it's not like a painting. I say, because you could do, if you're oil or acrylic or you're painting, you could always white over, gesso over, and start again. With my process, it's especially when you put down the darks, so you have to start light, you got to layer it. But if you put down hard dark, especially with some of these charcoal pencils and these hard pastel dusts, once they get into the fibers, because I love painting on a hot press watercolor paper, so it gets into the fibers. But it gives you this really cool feel, this old school feel. So that's why I love it more than canvas. But yeah. Once you're at it, like if I draw a face somewhere, like Ned wanting to add more players to the to the team, he kept asking, "Hey, let's put some more players." I'm like, we can't, because once it's down, it's down. So it's a challenging process, but a fun one as well. But so you're right.
Were there a player or two that were extremely difficult to draw?
Oh, there were more than player or two. Oh, to draw. I'm sorry. I thought you meant to pick.
Well, I'll
Oh,
talk about that
I
too. I
didn't
want to
draw
get
any players.
the drawing, no. There's less reference material for some. We talked about like how Zach Wheat, you don't get a lot of material. You don't get to look at his face as detailed as you do with images from today with, let's say, ball players of today. So when you're doing an older player, you just have less material and research you can do. So body types and swings or running style or whatever. So there's less detail. So the older guys are a little bit more difficult. But when it comes to just drawing, no, they're just all shapes. So once you get it kind of designed, the drawing and the painting part is easy. It's the design part sometimes that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, Ned, so that's a great question. So yeah, tell us about those tough ones. That you because as you said, the Dodgers are so filled, especially the pitching staff. My goodness, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to name names as to who was the last cut, so to speak, but
Right.
it was difficult. And had we many times when you see a list like this, it's really comprised of who people have seen lately. And I didn't think that was fair for this organization that's been around well over 100 years and has a history that it does. So you've got Zach Wheat, you've got Dazzy Vance, you've got players that I didn't see play, even though I'm an older guy. I didn't see them play, but I knew of them. And as you look at the history of the franchise, they need to be included. And so when you're limited to 25, and then when the roster's expanded in real life to 26, you've got to. I thought that we needed to pay homage and respect to many eras of baseball. If we just said, "Hey, this is the L.A. Dodgers all-time greats," it still would have been tough, but it would have been far easier if we didn't include Brooklyn. But how do you talk about the Dodgers without talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers? And so many of the players that are on that roster started their career and maybe finished it in LA, but maybe finished it in Brooklyn. So it was important that we take the history of the entire franchise, both cities, both coasts, different eras, and combine them all. And I think one of the great things that this book does, and this is really where Dave and I actually started with our friendship. You see players that never had a chance to be teammates of players talking in the same room, in the same clubhouse, around the cage. People who, had passed on before the other person was even born, but they are all Dodgers. And so they are all in this moment in time where you put them all in the same place in conversation or in activity. And to me, that is one of the coolest parts of the book, is to see Clayton. We've seen Clayton and Sandy Koufax many times, but we never saw Clayton with Don Drysdale. But you got that picture of the starting staff, and you've got Clayton a couple people away from Don Drysdale. You have Kenley Jansen with Don Drysdale and Don Sutton, and on and on. So to me, that was one of the coolest parts of Dave's work. Many things great about his work, but that you were able to take different generations, pay respect to them, and put them in the same place and time.
Yeah, just looking at I was at the game last night. Took my family, and to see some of the cool jerseys that were out there, like I saw a guy with a Drysdale jersey on. And you see actually, young kids with Vin Scully microphones on their shirts and things like that. I think the Dodgers actually do a very good job with their heritage. And I think this only enhances it. I think people in some ways are craving some of that history to go, because now there are people. I mean, Vin Scully stopped doing his thing in 2016. There are people actually that are starting to become Dodger fans that never heard him do a game.
Correct.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Or to see Tom Lasorda go out and do his thing. Um, we see, obviously a different ball game today. Good, and that's just subjective on if it's good or bad or what doesn't matter. But it's still baseball, and yeah, it's just amazing to see that. It's mind blowing to me. I know, and Dave, you've probably seen, done these things before where you have those different era people in the same picture, with the same drawings and the same paintings, and it's always been one of those things that's fascinated me to go, what would that conversation be like? And Dave, as you draw those pictures with people that weren't even alive at the same time, were you thinking about, what are they talking about? How did you bring the character to their faces and their and even probably even their positions in the dugout? I mean, Justin Turner would be somebody that's a captain type and in the front, and maybe and I'm just kind of mixing guys in. Steve Garvey maybe a little more laid back and quiet, except these days. And just to go figuring those things out. How did that work in for you as you drew these things?
That's actually, it's the fun part. Painting, I always say, the painting part is easy. That's just time. The design, working with Ned, one thing I love about working with Ned is his details. He has a lot of details. He's got a lot of information. So when you design something like our clubhouse scene, when Alston and Lasorda are holding a team meeting, Ned's back there with DeRocher, and you have people like Mr. O'Malley sitting in the side and Branch Rickey and Dr. Job. You just imagine, like, that's the fun part. You imagine, God, wouldn't it be cool if this meeting actually took place, or wouldn't it be rad if you did something like this, or you put it in a different position. For another example is the Gibson home run. We've seen the fist pump a bunch of times. We've seen it, but I want to do like, what about before he hit? When he's walking up, what was Eckersley thinking when he's walking up to bat? And so being able to do that, and like X looking back at Gibson coming up, it was fun. So the design work is really cool. It's the fun, creative part. The painting is a blast. Don't get me wrong, but that's like the work part. So it's just fun to just imagine, and the only way you could do that, or the best way you can do that, is when you hear these stories, this information. I know I want to talk about it, and Ned told me a story that, because when going back to your old question was, when we first started the book, when I first had the concept, all I thought about was 1 through 9. It was going to be a very simple book. It took a bunch of years because at one point I remember Ned saying, well, Dave, how do we do an all-time book, right? If we did 1 through 9 without Tommy in there or without Vin in there, hey, how do we do an all-time book without having Gibby's home run in there, or Hershiser's 59 scoreless, or stuff with that Jackie did from stealing home or moving to LA? Like, so that's kind of how, although we didn't plan the 3 years, it ended up making the book better, because it was supposed to be just a simple book, but it expanded because of that. And it's because of the stories. There's so many stories in this franchise that are amazing to listen to, and some haven't been documented. Some, there's no pictures of it. And one of my favorite ones is Grace, which is with Jackie and Nukem and Campy with Martin Luther King Jr. And that's a story in just talking and hanging out with Ned that came out of, oh yeah, I used to, because Ned was fortunate enough, and Ned will tell the story better, to be good friends with Nukem, and Nukem would tell the story of how they would meet and break bread and talk about segregation and racism and baseball and what to do, and how Martin Luther King, how those three guys helped him do what he did. Ned, chime in on that one, because that one's a special one.
Yeah, throughout every aspect of it, we tried to really include the human side of the person as much as the player. We can all look at stats and know who the players were and things like that, but the human aspect of who they were. And I was blessed to have spend a long time at the side of Don Nukem, and we would talk baseball all the time. And he'd come into my office, or I'd meet him behind home plate, or sit in the seats, him and his wife Karen, and just talk about whatever, including the issues that he saw as a young player coming up. And he was Jackie Robinson's roommate. He came up a little bit after Jackie broke the color barrier. Nuke continued it, and he came up a little bit after, but he was the roommate of Jackie. So think about, in that era, somebody who knew Jackie so well that they were roommates, and he would tell the stories of that era and what black players went through, what Jackie had gone through, and how they befriended Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and how they would meet every so often in the off season, or maybe if they were on the road in the same city, and they would have a meal with Dr. King. And I thought, what as great as Nuke was as a pitcher and as a Dodger representative in the community, that he would have that perspective. How do we not capture that as best we can? How do we leave that out? And we decided, Dave and I, we can't leave that out. It's poignant for the organization that broke the color barrier with Mr. Robinson, and then everything it has done since. So it was a key thing. And Dave, you should tell where that painting is today. And you got the Hall of Fame, which is a place you can get the book, and they've embraced it, and the Negro League Hall of Fame. Talk a little bit about that particular piece and where it's been and what it stands for beyond the book now.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me to think. I trip out a little bit every time I think about it, that we talked to Bob Kendrick, who's the president of the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City. That's an amazing soul right there. What a guy. He is a wealth of information. He's just a gem, and he's there telling stories about the Negro Leagues and discussing things and important topics and whatnot to bring, more people over to the museum to learn about that. Because a lot of the guys that didn't get to make the MLB that played in them. And to be able to have Grace be on permanent display at that museum is just, to me as an artist, it's like, there it is. That's what you want. You want the opportunity that, one, yes, people enjoy your work, and I love that, but be able to tell a story with your work and be in a special place like that is pretty special. So we've been fortunate enough where two of the paintings out of the books got in museums. One's at that Negro Leagues, which is Grace, and then the all-time second baseman, Jackie Robinson, is at the Jackie Robinson Museum in Lower Manhattan. And then working with the Hall, trying to bring these important stories to not only life but to visual life, so they people can learn and check them out.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing, because today, there'd be some meeting like that would happen, and all of a sudden it'd be on Instagram and with the pictures and all that, versus the imagination, just taking the stories and making it into a work of art. And my favorite that just kind of got me, just because I was shocked with it, was Jackie stealing home and Yogi Berra's face, because we all see the same angle. There's only one angle.
There's only one angle. Yep, there's only one angle. And how, like Yogi, and they said right until he left this earth, how he argued that Jackie was out and he would never give it up. And that was the point, is, every angle is the same angle. You see Jackie coming. Yeah. But one, I wanted to see 42. And then two, I wanted to see the eyes of Yogi, I'm glad you appreciate that piece, because that one gets kind of flipped over a little bit, but that's an important one, and I love that one.
Yeah, that's it. It was shocking to me, because it's like, oh, I never thought of that. There's a different angle to this.
That's awesome.
Yep, that's very cool. I tell you, and Dave, we'll get a laugh out of this, Tim, with Dave. Duke Snider was the Duke of Flatbush, right? Nickname and fan favorite, lived in the neighborhood. And so as we got around to the Duke, I said, we've got to do something that has got a neighborhood feel to it. So we came up with the idea of, there's a gas station across the street from Ebbets Field. It takes place in the gas station, this picture, this great piece of art. And I said, we got to put his house in it. We knew where the house was at, and we knew the address of the home. So we could figure out what that house looked like when Duke lived in it. And so, Dave, why don't you pick it up from there? Because I was on him for probably 6 months. You got to do this. This is going to make you famous. And he it was his bane of existence for a little while, but it came out great.
The whole we was not we wanted that in the book. It was Ned came up with this concept and would badger me about this. And so we had to, because Duke was, of course, the all-time center fielder, right? So then what I do is like, okay, I'm going to counter Ned. I'm going to do a great painting of Duke, like taking one deep at Ebbets, Jackie Round in first, like both looking up. And hopefully Ned will forget about this painting he's talking about, So I do this beautiful painting. One of my favorites because it looks so real. And then the first thing he's like, well, where's the other one? So we went back and forth. And I didn't want to do it. He's like, do it. This thing's going to be great. Just do it. And I'm like, and I kept delaying and I delayed. And it was my last painting. And I finally do it. And what he wants it. So basically Duke's leaving town. So it's in the moving to LA section, the moment. And basically Duke's leaving town. He's signing the last couple autographs. And he's got his car filling up at the gas station that was outside Ebbets. And in the windshield, in the reflection, is the house he lived in Flatbush. So there's like these little tidbits of stuff. So after I painted it, and basically what happened throughout this whole book, I'm like, all right, Ned was right. That was a great painting. Thank God I did it. Like, and I'm so glad that he kept like insisting on it, because he's got, I have a vision to be able to put it on paper. I could paint it, but he's got that vision in his brain, which I love, and that's why the book expanded. And I think why the book turned out so great was because of Ned's knowledge and information and these small little cool stories that me as a baseball fan, I know a lot, but a baseball guy like Ned knows a ton, and his wealth of knowledge and his basically determination to make this book perfect was a dream for me, because I'm a realistic painter. I want it perfect, and it bothers me if it's not. And so together, that's how I think we collaborated real well, because he knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted, and he's a GM. He knows what he wanted. And he puts the team together and he wins. So
we tried, Tim. We tried to, as I said, add the human aspect to it. And in the writing, I tried to at least have one aspect of the writing that maybe people didn't know, so that you could maybe pick up one piece of info that just thought, oh, I didn't know that about Sandy. I didn't know that about Jackie. As much as you do know, I knew enough people and did enough research to be able to add little things to it, and then have Dave add it to the painting, which makes it all the more special, all the more different. I mean, going back to that picture of Duke outside the stadium at the gas station, how do you have somebody whose famous nickname is the Duke of Flatbush, and you don't have Flatbush, something of Flatbush in the painting, right? I mean, it just made sense, and Dave made it come to life.
And as we talk about this, the quote that's out there, how can you not be romantic about baseball?
Amen.
It's such an amazing thing. And there are a ton of pictures in here, but that have been drawn by Dave. But there's a lot of writing that Ned's done. He goes back to his days as a writer and a PR guy and put out a whole heck of a lot of content. It's amazing, because you're getting so much in this book. You're getting the visual of just looking at a picture, and you can interpret it however you want. And then there's the writing, just the history of this beautiful franchise and this beautiful game. It's an amazing, the whole book to me is just a huge work, an amazing work of art.
Thank you, Tim. One other, and I think that Dave would agree with this. I did far more writing than I set out to do, and
Yeah.
Dave had far more art than he set out to do. It was probably 2 or 3 times. The end result ends up being probably 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times of Dave's original vision to what this would be. It just kept getting deeper, better, and longer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the cool thing about it, Ned. He's not cutting any corners. He didn't finish the write up of what I asked him to do. Like, the concept was 1 through 9. One side of the page was art, one side of the page was his words. You open it up, it's a 20-page book with thick paper, and that was it. But what happened he was just not going to settle. He had more to tell. He had more stories to educate people on. He did more research. And when you don't cut corners and you put in all the effort that Ned did, I felt, and I always put in my 100%, but I felt more pressure. I'm like, okay, now I got to I got to at least get on the same page as this guy. He's writing so much good stuff. I need to get this art, equal to the words. And because every time he sent me a chapter, I would just devour it. I loved it because he would send chapter by chapter. It wasn't just I got the book. I would get pictures, I get catchers, and then I would like read it, come up with concepts. So it was fun. And then he would add to it because as we were going through the process, things changed, and that's another major thing about this book that I love is it's not done, because the Dodgers aren't done. There's going to be another volume, 3 to 5 years. There's going to be a lot more moments. There's going to be a lot more wins, a lot more championships. And I feel like, that's what's great about the model of this book is it's in an organization that's going to keep growing. There's more stuff going. So Ned's going to write more stuff, hopefully, and I'm going to paint more pictures. So.
And hopefully Timmy's going to let me expand the roster because getting to 26 was tougher than getting to 26 in real life.
You should
paint another one.
You should go back to the old September 40-man rosters.
That's what I tried to convince him.
Oh,
would have
yeah.
been more painting and more writing, but would have been a lot easier in my end.
In one painting, he wanted me to expand it. In one painting, there's 26 guys, right? There's 2 coaches, there's 2 announcers, there's 2 owners, and a GM. And then and this thing was a bear, man. This thing took forever. That one took over a month. And then Ned's like, hey, let's add. Bap, 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 bap. I'm like, I can't do it. This thing just made me crazy. I can't do it. And he's like, hey, we got to add these guys. We got to do this. I'm like, I'm out. I can't do it. I can't do it.
I think something that needs to be done 5 years after a certain pitcher that Ned Colletti drafted is inducted into the Hall of Fame. There needs to be a picture of Ned in the draft room or a signing with the baby-faced assassin Kershaw, and then the induction.
That's sweet.
I mean, something
there you
like
go,
that.
Dave. Start working on it, Dave.
I know, but are you releasing that idea? Like, do we get that idea? Because we want the copyright.
Yeah, you have all you want, man. I again, for people that don't know, the first draft choice that Ned Colletti ever made for the Los Angeles Dodgers was Clayton effing Kershaw.
I mean, crazy. That's crazy.
Turned out to be pretty good, I'd say, and a good man as well.
Yes.
But yeah, we had a lot of great people working there for a long, long time, and they still have great people working there. And I thought we did a lot with a little in some ways.
Right.
We didn't have the financial power that currently exists, but nobody cared what our budget was. We just had to make it work as best we could with what we had. Anyway, I got to run, Tim. I appreciate you very much having us on and great questions, great conversation, and hope to run into it. If you need us on again sometime, don't hesitate to give us a shout. We'll talk a little Dodgers ball.
That would be awesome. I appreciate it. And by the way, buy The Big Chair by Ned Colletti, and you get all the good, gory details.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate both Dave and Ned coming on, and we'll be talking more about this book as we go. This channel is a fan of the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on. I appreciate you looking.
Thank you, Tim.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that. More than an interview, it's conversation where you could see the love of Dodger history amongst all of us. So you can get the book. Some places it sells it paperback, some in hardback. Retails for $40 on their website, which is thealltime.com. You should be able to see if you can get it for the $100 for a limited edition signed by the artist, or $300 for a limited edition signed by Oral Hershiser, Ned Colletti, and Dave Hobrecht. You can tell the love that went into that. It went into building the whole book. Dave, it has so much artwork out there. He has his own site. It's Hobrecht.com. And you spell his name Hobrecht. And you just find out more about him. Fascinating gentleman. Loves the Dodgers. Is a local, well, not for me because I'm down in San Diego, but local for LA. He's got all sorts of great artwork. And you can just tell his love for the game and love for the Dodgers, and creating from history some artwork that and some perspectives that you wouldn't even think of in some ways, because back then they didn't have every little event all of a sudden it shows up on Instagram. So again, thank you for hanging in there and watching this. I believe you are rewarded by watching that. I thought that the stories between Ned and Dave are fantastic, and I'm looking forward to any additions in the future. Looking at you guys, Shohei, Ohtani, Mookie Betts, who knows who else it could be. So again, thank you so much for listening. As always, God bless, and go Dodgers.